Okay.
Close. Up close.
Oh, man. So I need to tell you right off the bat, I'm a very nervous speaker, so if I faint, don't think anything about it. It's not you. I'm so excited to be here today. As Gus told you, I am the CEO at Bauer, and I'm proud to have 2 degrees from Purdue University. And there's my friend Sigmund Freud, since I'm a licensed mental health counselor. He didn't help inform my training at all. So he's kind of what I don't do. I'm also married to that guy for 38 years today. So he's a retired state policeman and an investigator, and I kind of like him. I told him this morning, thanks for those happy 20 years of marriage. And then those 2 little girls are my granddaughters, except that we are raising them. So the one on the left is turned 13 this summer, so I'm back in the teenage business, and her name is Sophia. The one on the right will be 2 years old in October, and her name is Sarah. They are sisters. And I did the math, which was bad, because I figured out that when Sophia graduates from high school, Sarah will graduate from kindergarten. So I'm a little nervous about that. I am the first one in my family to go to college, so going to Purdue when I did was really a big deal for me. And this is the woman who told me all my childhood that I could do it. This is my Grandma Young. She always encouraged me. She told me I was smart enough. This is a woman who ran a grain elevator and wore pants back when she wasn't supposed to. So I kind of believed what she said. She encouraged me, gave me money, pushed me, had both of her hands in my back. So after working for a semester in a plastics factory in Crawfordsville, I decided I'd go to school, and I studied journalism at Vincennes University. I dropped out of Vincennes to get a real job as a reporter. I worked at Lebanon and Crawfordsville newspapers for a while. But in 1989, I went back to school at Purdue as an adult because of this young man. This is my nephew, Kirk William Holman. That's him in the tree, and that's me trying to keep him from falling. He's the long-awaited adopted son of my older sister. On the right, you see him with his 2 sisters. The middle girl is Amy, and she's adopted as well. And then, as often happens, came along Stacy, who wasn't adopted. She kind of came the old-fashioned way. Had a pretty normal childhood. Parents stayed married. This is them again on your left. And there's Kirk. He's about 12 years old. He suffered his first overdose at age 11, just before he went into middle school. Kirk was a good kid. His family responded, got him treatment. He was popular. He was a football star in high school. He finally graduated high school on time, but he was in and out of drug and alcohol treatment for almost all of his high school years. After graduating from high school, he joined the Army, and he married Bobby, and that's them with their first child. That's Amber Dawn. Even with the Army and a wife and a beautiful child, his addiction continued, and he was extremely depressed and struggled in and out of treatment. One year, this is the year I graduated from college and had my first job at Bauer. I took my first job at Bauer as a part-time temporary therapist. I want you to remember the temporary part, and I've been doing it now for 25 years, so apparently I don't know the definition of that word. This is Kirk and his 2 girls. So I just graduated, had my first counseling job. I went to school to be a therapist, because that's not very popular in my family, because of Kirk. I watched him go in and out of treatment, and he didn't get better. And he kept failing. And I don't know anybody who wanted more than Kirk to be sober and to be clean. But he kept struggling. One year after this picture was taken, he walked out to the garage of his parents' home and hung himself. And that motivated me to continue to do the work. So I do the work that I do every day to honor my nephew's life and death. I've been at Bauer for 25 years, because even though it was a temporary job, I fell in love with the families that we serve, because they remind me so much of my nephew. And so doing the work that I do is really about honoring his life and his death. In many ways, I'm like our founder, Grace Bauer. Grace also responded to what she saw. I saw it in my family, and she saw it in her community. Grace Bauer was Tippecanoe County's first probation officer. She was appointed and took over the job from judges. Back in the day, Tippecanoe County didn't get, we were the 46th county to get a probation officer. And it was interesting, her first year on the job, she served about 4 adults and about 110 kids. And what Grace saw in that group of kids was that they shouldn't be in her office, that there ought to be something that she could do so kids didn't end up getting arrested and going through the court system. And she used 3 values to really, to really guide her work. First of all, she responded to community need. Grace saw what the need was in our community, saw those kids, and decided she was going to make a difference. She collaborated with others. She had friends and belonged to ladies' tea clubs, and all of those people, I can just imagine being at tea with Grace, and she's wearing her big hat and has her little cup, and she's strong-arming her friends into helping her come and play bingo with kids and have dances. She was so good at this that she got one of her friend's husbands to donate an apartment, which eventually became the whole house, down on South 3rd Street for her to use for programming. The other thing that Grace did is she never gave up. One of the sad parts of Grace's story is that when she was 74, she was murdered by a 22-year-old man that she had been working with since he was 11 years old. But she never gave up on him, even though his past and his life was very, very troubled. I'll tell you a little about our history. We've been around, it'll be 90 years next year, so we're getting ready for a big party. As I said, Grace founded us in 1929. Depression came, and the house really operated as more like a settlement house. And Grace and her friends realized, I can't help kids if families are falling apart, so we need to help the families too. And so we have stories about big bean dinners and coat handouts to really help folks. And so for the first time, they named themselves, and it was the Community House Association. They hired their first staff in 1938, renamed themselves in 1942, and this whole rename thing, you're going to hear that a lot during my coverage of our history. I ran off the page, didn't I? Sorry. Renamed ourselves the Southside Community Center in 1955. We opened daycare. You can get daycare for $1.50 a week. Wouldn't you like that now? Yeah. Right? I checked for Sarah. It's $210, so it's gone up a little. In 1959, we changed our name to the Southside Community Center and Daycare Center because we were serving parents. And in 1965, we pioneered one of the very first Head Start programs in the country. In 1970, we merged with the Lincoln Center to become, my typeface didn't transfer, that's what happened, okay. To become the Greater Lafayette Community Center. One of the things about our organization that's really cool is we have a long history of partnering and starting programs in response to community needs and launching other groups. So for example, are you familiar with Riggs Community Health Clinic? Right? They started as a physician referral service in our community center, and then outgrew us and on they went. And so we have a number of organizations that we're connected to like that. Hannah Center is another one. We had buildings in the North End and South End in 1972, which happened to be the year I graduated from high school. I did not start when Grace started, although sometimes I think my staff think I did. Fire destroyed both of our buildings that year, and so we built a building at the corner of 4th and Fountain Street. I believe that because we had 2 buildings burn that year, that our board of directors decided it would never happen again, and we built the first all-concrete block building in the city that will never, ever, 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 never burn down. In 1983, we changed our name again. In 1995, we acquired property out on Eisenhower Road for our Head Start program.
Did you get this?
Pardon? In 98, we added Early Head Start, and in 2006, opened our Babies Can't Wait program. And in 2010, we rebranded for what I believe will be the last time, and changed our name to Bauer Family Resources, and our mission statement to creating brighter tomorrows for children and families today. When we went to rebrand in 2010, we really talked about who did we want to be and how did we want to represent ourselves to the community. So we went looking for Grace's family, and I'm a bit of a genealogy nut, so I was able to find some information about the family at the library and then online. So in Ancestry.com, if anybody does that, it doesn't put living people's names, but it put living person junior. So I was able to figure out who they were and find them. It's interesting to chat with them because they told us that they knew Grandma had done something, but they didn't know what, and were quite surprised to see what Grandma's legacy was and how large it was. They've been supporters of the organization since then, and they've started the Bauer Book Program. So every year at Christmas time, we get checks from all across the country from descendants of Grace Bauer, and we use that money to buy books for kids. So it's really it's really very exciting. So Bauer Family Resources is comprised of 3 divisions, we call them. We have our Youth Development Program, which is really the legacy of Grace's founding of the organization. It's where we do the same kind of work that Grace did with kids. It was our first program. We also do Family and Youth Services, which provides case management to a number of different kinds of families. And we do early care and education programming. So first, I'm so sorry my slides didn't work. This is about our youth services program. How many of you have seen the community center there at the corner of 4th and Fountain Street, right? Looks a little bit like a juvenile detention facility with the blocks over the windows. We're hoping to take those off. We've been doing services there since 1976, and it's the home of our free after-school program. So if you're in the building about 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon after school, you're over to hear the front doors whoosh open and all this yelling and hollering and hooping and kids who are happy to be somewhere where they know they're going to get a snack. They're going to get to hang out with cool college kids, and they're not like that part so much, but they get homework help. So we spend time reading, doing homework, large physical activities. We do a lot of STEM activities at the community center. And every night we serve them dinner. So many of our kids don't have adequate food. And so every night we serve dinner. And on Thursday nights, Evangelical Covenant Church for over 10 years now brings a home-cooked meal, and we serve the kids and their families. So we serve somewhere between 100 and 150 every Thursday night. That partnership has provided us with the opportunity for those kids to get connected to all kinds of great supports, and parents to get connected to all kinds of great supports. It's been a real blessing for our families. In the summertime, we offer a free summer camp. So we just wrapped up summer camp, which makes the building really noisy all day long, which is really cool. During the summertime, it's 10 weeks. Both of these programs, there's no charges for kids or families. We try to provide an experience in the summertime that's similar to experiences that other kids get in the summertime. So we take them swimming every week. We take them on field trips. We take them just anywhere we can to get them out and experiencing, so that when they go back to school and the teachers ask, "What did you do this summer?" they have a good story to tell. The other thing that it does is it provides supervision for them during the summer. And again, we provide 2 snacks and lunch every day for them. So this summer, we had a donation from the Lafayette Life Foundation that allowed us to send them on multiple field trips over the summer. Their favorite was the Children's Museum in Indianapolis. A couple years ago, we took a busload of kids. My staff is so brave, I would never do this, to the Field Museum in Chicago. Right? So we had a number of kids who'd never been out of the state who were on that bus. And one of the kids was 14 years old. And the thing he was most excited about was on the way back. We stopped at, what's that overpass thing where the restaurants and gas stations are?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He was very excited because he'd never been to McDonald's before. So he had a cheeseburger at a restaurant where he could watch the cars drive under him. So those are the kinds of limitations that our kids have. They don't have the experiences that their classmates do naturally, so we try to create those for them. We are starting our second year as a 21st Century Community Learning Center. That's a program that's in partnership with Sunnyside Intermediary School. And what we do is we provide programming at Sunnyside that extends the learning day for kids, but we do it in a fun way. So we're still working on subjects that are important for them to be learning in school. We target kids who are struggling with their standardized testing scores so that we make sure that we get those kids bolstered and on their way. One of the things that the research is very clear about is that middle school is a really dangerous time for kids in terms of their learning and their commitment to learning and their moving on. When you think about it, in elementary school, there's lots of handouts, there's one teacher, she knows you, she's helping you, she's encouraging you. And we send you off to middle school, and you have to change classes, and you have to carry a book bag, and all these different things. There's not one desk you're sitting at, and that transition is very hard for some kids. It creates an environment where they just lose interest. So our goal is to provide them with support during this transition. We use an evidence-based program called Lit Art. That's a lot of fun for the kids. It's a fun way to learn to read and practice reading skills. Also at Sunnyside, we offer a program called School Court. The purpose of School Court is to keep kids in the classroom, because if they're not in the classroom, they're not learning. So when they're expelled or suspended, they learn classroom-based time. They don't get the learning that they need. So Sunnyside has been very progressive and built School Court into their disciplinary process. So before a kid can get expelled or kicked out, we talk with the family. We get permission to talk with the family agrees to this, and the young person comes in. The cool thing about School Court is it's a peer program. So other kids, tell the kid in School Court what their consequence is for being naughty at school. So what happens is, instead of a bunch of adults saying, you're going to get, this or that as your consequence, it's their peers saying, that behavior is not okay in our school, and as a consequence for that, this is what's going to happen. And the kids really respond to that. So we provide services. We have court in the mornings. So the first consequence is you have to be at school at 7:30, because we have court in the morning. And then the kids get services from our school-based school court person throughout the day. So if a teacher's having a hard time with a kid, the school court person goes down. She observes kids in the classroom settings to help build interventions for them. And then after school, they spend time together as a group and do social activities. They do community service activities, and we do character building activities to help them be more successful. And of course, we do homework. So one of the things I want to tell you about the community center that's kind of cool, is we have a big gym, and it's called Wombold Fieldhouse. So we have one or two Purdue bands in here, I know. So Steve Wombold was the barefoot kicker at Purdue. He graduated, I think, in 92 or 93, and he got in a little bit of trouble, and so his coach sent him to us for his community service. He too fell in love with the organization, and when he graduated from Purdue, became a youth worker with us, and later left and went on to become a big CEO. He and a group of his buddies, he received a letter one year from a young man who he'd worked with at community center. And the young man said to him, Mr. Wombold, I want you to know that I turned out okay. I'm an okay dad, I have an okay life, and that's because you helped me. You cared about me. So Steve was so touched by that he got back in touch with us. And at the 2010 rebranding, we renamed the gym the Wombold Fieldhouse. And he and his buddies, who were Purdue grads, many of whom were kids at the community center, do a fundraiser for us every year. One of the things I'll never forget is that first year when we unveiled the gym, two of his kids that had been with him as students at the community center were there to speak. And these younger men were doing okay with their lives. They were married and were working. families from poverty, and they were getting out of that poverty. And they spoke tearfully in front of the entire group about the impact Steve had had on their lives, how he had changed them, how he'd helped given them hope. And so the next year when the group came back to present us with our donation check, those two young men were part of his employee group. He took those men one more time and lifted them up. It's just such a great story about how the impact we can have goes on and on. So here's some of the facts about youth development. We have 166 members down at the community center. They're 6 to 18 years of age. We provided last year 16,000 hours of service to kids. 100% of the youth who participated in our program were not arrested. I want you to think about that for just a minute. 100%. And these are high-risk kids. They live in poverty. They have latchkey homes. 95% of the families that we serve at community center at Bauer are living in poverty. So 100% weren't arrested. Almost 79% maintained or improved their academic progress. And when I'm talking to you about kids who are in middle school, that's a big deal. 78% reported an increase in caring positive adults in their lives. Another big deal. The story I just told you about Steve Wambald, right? Caring adult made a big difference in those people's lives. And 63% showed an overall improvement in their life circumstances. That could be that they got jobs, their families moved to a better place. So it's really cool. Now we do an event called Celebrate Youth for the last 7 years. It's really about recognizing young people in our community who overcome obstacles. So these are good kids just plugging away. You're not going to read about them in the newspaper because they're not got the highest GPA or the highest, earn run average, but they're just doing what they need to do. So in 2016, we had a young woman by Janelle who was named as the Youth of the Year. And she doesn't mind us telling her story, so I'm not kind of speaking out of school. Janelle had come from a home with a single mom who was disabled. Janelle worked a job, went to high school, was the primary financial support for her family. She had an auntie who was a big support to her to help her get through that, and her auntie died unexpectedly. And Janelle and her family became homeless. During this time, Janelle was a young person at the community center. She was a member of our dance team. We encouraged her. We kept telling her she could do it. We supported her and her family in all the ways that we could. And Janelle graduated from high school. And then she won Youth of the Year. And she went on to college. And so I'm so excited to report that just today, I got word that Janelle is starting as a youth worker at Bauer Family Resources in just a month. So that just gives me goosebumps because this is a young lady who was on a path that could have been very, very different for her. Another program that we have is called Family-Centered Services. Now, I couldn't show you a picture of one of our real families, so that's me in the bottom right-hand corner there, and my dad, my older sister, my grandmother, and great-grandmother. So that's a 4-generation picture. So I was a little younger then. And you'll see my dad has a baby bottle, and my sister, who's not 21, has a beer can. What you don't see in the picture is my sister, who was 1 year old, who's the bottle really belongs to, but they were hamming it up for the picture. Family-Centered Services is one of those programs that serves really families that are in great stress and in great need. In that program, we provide case management services. Our case management services are conducted in the homes of our families. Our case management services are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if your crisis is at 1 a.m. on Saturday, we'll be there. We provide supervised visitation for families who don't have custody of their children. And during supervised visitation, we allow those families the opportunity to interact with their kids and be parents. We provide a drug and alcohol treatment called Living in Balance. And we do an evidence-based intervention program called Home Builders. In our Family-Centered Services program, families are involved with the child welfare system. That means CPS has been out and made a determination that the kids are at risk. Sometimes those families are removed from those kids are removed from the home, and sometimes they're not. Last year we served 130 families for over 15,000 hours. I'm really proud to report that 92% of our families were reunited and successfully maintained in their homes. The national average for that number is below 40%. So our families work really hard, and we use evidence-based programs to involve them. I've been at this working with this population since I started with the company in '93. And what we see now, what we used to have was a lot more neglect and abuse, physical abuse. Now we have almost 90% of our families that come into the system are drug involved. And it's not the first generation generally. We're seeing cases are taking longer because substance abuse recovery takes longer. And we also see that has been an increase in the number of parents who are losing their parental rights, and terminations are happening, which means we have more kids going into adoption and into relative care, just like me. So there are more of me out there. So it's a hard thing for our families. We have a house on 3rd Street that is a beautifully restored home from the 1880s. And in it we have kitchens and bathrooms and dining rooms and living rooms where families can have the opportunity to parent, not just visit. When back in the olden days we used to do this in an office, and it was really artificial. So in the Family Support Center and the Babies Can't Wait House, what they can do is fix a meal, clean up the meal, give their kids a bath, all of those things that you would have to do if you had your child at home. So it's a really great experience for our families. I think that's part of the reason we can be so successful. Community Partners is another program we do. Not one of our client babies, but isn't she cute? We do case management, concrete needs, safe sleep, much like Family Support Center, but this program is designed to keep families from coming into the CPS side, right? So we have families who experience crisis in our community, and most of the families we have that tip into the child welfare side are because they are experiencing some kind of crisis. We served 1,100 families last year. 167 families received safe sleep education and materials. Those materials include a pack and play, a Snuggie, and a book, and a 30-minute training session with us on how to keep kids sleeping safe. We also spent nearly $100,000 last year on meeting the concrete needs of families. That means we did everything from pay electric bills to buy work boots, fix cars, anything families needed to be able to stay afloat and not tip into the crisis that often creates neglect. 98.9% of our families who did 8 visits did not have a substantiated case of abuse 1 year after we finished. So they didn't get involved in that system for 2 years. That's an incredible success rate. What we know is sometimes I just need a little help. And case management helps us. We don't just write a check and turn it over. We help families learn how to access resources. I had some gentleman asked me earlier about our community resource guide, which we still do. It's both in print and online. But being able to connect families to those resources helps to give them the skills to be able to take care of themselves and gets them over that hump that keeps them from ending up in a really dire place. We had a young woman who was working 2 jobs, had 2 kids in 2 different centers, and going to school. Her car broke down at the same time that her tuition was due. If she fixed her car, she couldn't pay her tuition. If she paid her tuition, she couldn't fix her car and couldn't get her kids to center. So we fixed her car, cost us about $450. A year later, she graduated with her CNN, down to 1 job, and maintaining housing for her kids. Our investment was $450, right? So those are the kinds of things that we really work on. I'm going to wrap it up. Gus says I got to wrap it up. Early care and education, we do Head Start and Early Head Start. I think that's pretty familiar to folks. 334 kids in Head Start, Early Head Start. The cool thing about Head Start, it's comprehensive. That means we don't just take care of kids, we take care of the whole family. We like to say we don't get kids kindergarten ready, we get families kindergarten ready. 7 counties we serve, we have a staff of 160, annual budget of $7 million. 4% of our budget comes from United Way. We do an annual, a semi-annual satisfaction survey. 94.5% of those who we serve have reported that their lives have been improved by working with us. We're kind of proud of that.
Good for you.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
One of the factors I think that creates a lot of issues within the family, as we saw with the gentleman that killed his wife and 2 children, are financial troubles. Do you do any financial counseling as part of your work with these families?
Yes, we do. With our families that are involved in child welfare and in our community partners program, handling your finances and learning how to do a budget and pay your bills and stay current is an important part of the work that we do. We also help them know how to access resources. So if I'm getting food stamps and my food stamps aren't enough, I'm going to show you how to use the food pantries to supplement that, so that we help reduce that very stress that tips people over. Anything else? Yes, sir.
You mentioned the difficulties that children encounter in middle school. Some of us, we grew up, there was no such thing as middle school. So can you say this is in the research that they have that problem?
Yes, both when you transition from elementary to middle and from middle to high school. So you'll see, so I did some research, and if you look at standardized test scores, kids do great in elementary school, they drop in middle school, and they drop more in high school. So our averages for our kids, the same cohort of kids, drops by almost 10 to 20 points across that time. The research speaks about the change that happens at transition. We all know that transitions are hard for people. Both of us think about changing a job, moving to a new house, getting married. Even positive transitions are hard. And for kids, they're even more difficult because they have less control.
And remedy?
I don't get paid that much. But I think there are a couple of things. I think we have to focus on how do we help make those transitions better. So some schools, schools are getting better about bringing the elementary kids over. It's about making sure that as those kids transition, there are almost 2,000 kids at Sunnyside, and that's just 5th and 6th grade. I was scared when I went there because there were so many of them, and they're really loud. So it's a really chaotic environment. So I think, how do we help transition kids from that? My kid happens to go to a school that it's like you're saying, K to 12, and that transition, that's much easier for her because she's in the same building, the same teachers, it's all the same for her. So those transitions have been much easier. Thank you.